that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners, will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood? I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering.
Hi, I'm DuShun Scarbrough, Executive Director of the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. The mission of the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission is, as a state agency and a division of the Arkansas Department of Education, is to promote and preserve the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in our state, and to promote the principles of nonviolence and equality among all citizens. Our community outreach projects are designed to promote education and to encourage youth to engage in positive leadership development roles within their communities. The Commission also works directly with members of the community to offer service opportunities. Today's presentation is brought to you by FedEx, U.S. Bank, Walmart, the City of Harrison, and Devereaux Management Company. Today, the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission will host a one-hour virtual program in partnership with the City of Harrison's Task Force on Race Relations to address the City of Harrison's approach to improving its race relations. The Commission has returned to Harrison to broadcast the world a virtual conversation with Dr. Bernice A. King, CEO of the King Center for Nonviolence and Social Change in Atlanta, Georgia. At this time, I am honored to introduce Dr. Bernice A. King. She is a global thought leader, orator, peace advocate, and chief executive officer of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which was founded by her mother, Coretta Scott King, in 1968. Through her work at the King Center, Bernice prepares youth and adults to create a more just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world by educating and training them to understand and apply Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy and methodology, which the King Center calls Nonviolence 365. Dr. King is a noted author. She has, to her credit, Hard Questions, Hard Answers, which is a compelling and inspiring book. Dr. King is an innovative, energetic, and committed leader dedicated to taking her parents' legacy and teachings, the King Center, the work of the building the beloved community through Nonviolence 365 into a new era. I'm honored to present my mentor, who I enjoy working closely with, the youngest daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, Dr. Bernice A. King, CEO of the King Center. Please also allow me to introduce my guest from Harrison, Arkansas, Mayor Jackson, who is the city mayor of Harrison, Arkansas, Layne Ragsdale of the Harrison Task Force on Race Relations. Now let's start right here in Harrison. Harrison's history of racism includes 2 race riots in the early 20th century, which ended Blacks being expelled from the city and an influx of white supremacist activity in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Because of this, Harrison, Arkansas has been described by several sources as the most racist town in America. You can also even Google Harrison, and as the most racist town will rank first in the search results. My first question is to Mayor Jackson. Given this information, Mayor, why is this not an accurate depiction of Harrison, Arkansas?
Well, to start with, it is not accurate. 40 years ago, when me and my family moved to Harrison, we were shocked. We were just shocked that the word KKK still existed somewhere in the United States. But since that time, everybody in Harrison has done so much to change that perception, especially the task force. We have had 2 task force over the last 25 years, of which the last 20 years has been the one in place today.
And I think it's good to know that we have a growing population of color here in our community. Our latest statistics show that 6% of our population, including Hispanics and Latinos, are non-white. So for Boone County, which is our county in which Harrison resides, that's about 2,200 people that live here that make up this growing, vibrant community. They move here for work, they move here to go to school at our community college, they move here to retire. And that's such an important part of our community that gets lost oftentimes in our reputation. We're proud of that.
Well, we recommend and we really truly commend the Harrison Task Force for all that you do. Mayor Jackson, it is understood statewide that African Americans, if you drive to Conway, Arkansas or Fayetteville, Arkansas, you can drive there, but stay away from Harrison, Arkansas. Several Harrison residents have related to the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission that African Americans who visit the Buffalo National River have indicated that they are out-of-state visitors. Or what can be done, in your opinion, to convince African Americans in Arkansas that Harrison is a welcoming place?
Well, I want to share with you a few things that we have recently done. And to start with, we passed a resolution through the city and the county, the first time ever a joint resolution between city and county has been done on anything. We denounced racism. We also asked the state lawmakers to pass a law against hate crime. So that was a big deal. We were one of the first counties in Arkansas to do such a thing. We also appointed a special committee to go to work, come back to us in 90 days and tell us some of the things we can do immediately.
And that's on top of the ongoing work of the task force that's been in place for the last 17 years. One of the important aspects about the idea of safety was that the first trial that was held and conviction in the United States under the Matthew Shepard hate crime bill was actually tried here in Harrison. It was a crime that wasn't committed here, but the federal courthouse here was where the trial was held, and it was a Harrison jury. We were glad to see that Harrison was at the forefront of that legal justification as well. But safety is one thing. Welcoming is something altogether different, and we work to be strategically welcoming. A great example of that, for 3 years in a row, our community college here hosted the National Women's Basketball Championship. Had a lot of diverse teams come to our area, and we understood that a lot of the parents would be very nervous about their precious daughters coming to Harrison after what they had read on the internet about Harrison, Arkansas. And so we ask people here in the community to really adopt these teams. So when these teams came to our community, and they stayed for weeks at a time during this 3-year period, when they came, they already had friends and cheerleaders on the ground, but more importantly, the moms and dads that were worrying about their daughters being in Harrison knew there were moms and dads on the ground here that were looking out for them and committed to them. And that turned out to be a wonderful relationship builder for our community and for the teams that we had the opportunity to host here.
Dr. Bernice A. King, I have to say, it is a pleasure. I've known you for years, and I just appreciate all that you do. And personally, the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia, is a life-changing experience. And it has been for me and my staff when visiting. And I feel everyone needs to attend and learn about the Nonviolence 365 and the King legacy. I mean, outreach groups, we need to get nonprofits there, educational institutions. And I think it's very, very important. To learn more about the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, please go to kingcenter.org. With that said, my next question is for Dr. Bernice King. Dr. King, can you give us an overview of the history of the 6 principles of nonviolence?
Thank you, DuShun, and I'm delighted to be with you all today. I'm sorry I couldn't be in person, but thank God for the virtual experience that we have, and maybe when we get past this, we can be face to face. My father, during his educational journey, was seeking to find a way to address the racial conditions of the South in particular, but in this nation as a whole. And on that journey, he came across many philosophers and many theologians that he studied. And as a result, developed what he called a philosophy and methodology of nonviolence, which was heavily influenced by Mahatma Gandhi, who had used nonviolent satyagraha in India to liberate them from the British control. And so in that process, he was able to weave together some truths from different philosophers and different theologians to come up with this philosophy and methodology. And he landed on 6 principles. And these 6 principles are the foundation of the nonviolent social change process. They are complemented by 6 steps that go hand in hand. They work in a synergistic fashion, but in order to practice nonviolence outwardly, these principles have to be understood and embraced because they impact how you carry out the 6 steps of nonviolence and the kind of spirit in which you carry out the 6 principles of nonviolence. In order to understand these principles, let me say that for my father, it was very critical in the end to preserve and create a sense of community. And so a lot of this is grounded in that notion. It's also grounded in his commitment to Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you. So you have to keep that in mind as you're thinking about these principles. It does not mean, though, if you're not a Christian, you can't practice them, because there is synergy between satyagraha of Gandhi and agape of Dr. King. They intersect. And where they intersect is really understanding the value and the dignity and the worth of human life, human personality. And so the 6 principles really are this. The first one is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. So many people think that, you know, when you're practicing nonviolence, when you're engaged in it, you are acquiescing to systems and structures and people. You are cooperating with those system structures and people. And you're kind of passively going along because they don't see the energy and fervor that people often see when people do violent acts. Nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, but believes that it has to be active, you know, but it's active with all of its internal resources of engaging your mind, your psyche, your emotions, in that act, as well as your body, but not in the sense that you utilize violent act to destroy other people. And so it actively resists evil and oppression and injustice. So that's the first principle, that it is a way of life for courageous people. Secondly, it seeks to win friendship, excuse me, and nonviolence. And that goes back to that understanding of community, the beloved community in particular that we'll talk about a little bit later. But because the aftermath of nonviolence is the beloved community, you want to ensure that whatever you are engaging in to bring about social change, to bring about social transformation, that you are seeking to win that person over and not win over the person. You know, so often we go into situations and we want to win. We want to triumph. We want to beat the other person. But in the nonviolent philosophy, under this second principle of seeking to win friendship and understanding, you're not trying to win over them. You're trying to win them over to an understanding. You're trying to win them over in terms of friendship and win them over to create a pathway that is a win-win pathway for all parties. The third principle is nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice and not people. And that's so tied even into the second principle, because in the process of winning people over, you don't want to humiliate them. You don't want to diminish and demean them. Your focus is on the issue, or on the problem, on the injustice. You're not trying to destroy, defeat, or in this current culture, cancel people, because you can't cancel people out of a beloved community. The whole effort is to win people over. The whole effort is to create an environment where people can coexist together. And so you don't focus on people and seeing how I can just push out people, get rid of people, no matter how evil they might be, but you focus on the evil doing, the evil act. So you seek to defeat that. And you use all the rest of your resources in an effort to win them over, that you kind of disarm them and have an ability to appeal to their conscience, and hopefully through time and effort and energy, they will be transformed. Nonviolence is the fourth principle. Nonviolence holds that voluntary suffering can educate and transform, or as we like to say, unearned suffering is redemptive. And it's voluntary. It's voluntary because you are willing to accept the suffering or the consequences. You are willing to accept blows, but not inflict them, because you are doing it in an effort to showcase, to expose the evil. If everybody kind of gets in and enmeshed in trying to retaliate against what just happened to them, you can't sort out and determine where the evil is, where the injustice is, where the wrongdoing is. And so you are willing to put yourself in a position where you suffer without retaliation. You accept it. You accept the consequences of your acts. You don't inflict the suffering, but you use your body, you use your mind, and you use your spirit to again appeal to that conscience and make sure that you keep the issue clean so that people can see the injustice. I like to say to people, when John Lewis was on that bridge fighting for the right to vote, he willingly accepted, he and Hosea Williams and Amelia Boynton and so many others accepted that suffering because they were looking at the greater picture and the greater good to come from it in terms of protecting the right and preserving the right and advancing the right to vote. But look what happened. It was redemptive because he got to later, we didn't know at the time he was on the bridge, but later in his life, he served as congressman for 40-something years under our first African-American president for 2 terms. So that's unearned suffering being redemptive. Sometimes it doesn't come to the person directly, but it comes to another generation or another group of people. The fifth principle is nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. That principle is there so that people understand that nonviolence is holistic. When you think about violence, the natural reaction is for people to think that violence is physical, and violence can be it can be something you say out of your mouth, how you use your mouth, the language you use. It can be in the policies you make. And so when we say nonviolence chooses love instead of hate, you not only refuse to hit your opponent, you refuse to hate your opponent or your adversary. And so that's how you choose love. You refuse to use words, again, that denigrate people. And then finally, nonviolence believes, as the sixth principle, that the universe is on the side of justice, and for those that are people of faith, that God is on the side of justice, that you have constant companionship that is working in concert with your acts to bring about a more just society, working along with you to bring about a solution that is a win-win for humanity.
Absolutely a win-win. You know, I hear you speaking, Dr. King, and I've been to so many of the trainings at the King Center in recent years, and my favorite was on April 27, 2018, which was my birthday, and your mother's birthday. We share that.
Yes.
Birthday. And I was in class on my birthday with you all, and we broke into groups, and I was assigned principle number 3, to teach
Mhm.
class. And I found that very helpful and impactful. And I find it related to what's going on here in Harrison as well, by me being assigned that principal. Dr. King, if your father were here today, what solutions would he recommend for cities like Harrison, Arkansas, with strained histories of race relations?
Well, you know, I appreciate that question, DuShun, but I want to kind of flip it if you don't mind, because he's not here today, but I'm here today.
Yes, ma'am.
And there's some things that I would like to suggest that I think is out of the heart and spirit of who my father and mother were. And I think the first thing is, it is extremely important for anyone, not just in this nation, but across the world. But I'll speak specifically in the context of our nation and to your community there in Harrison, that it is extremely important that we understand the history of race and racism. There are a lot of myths, and there are a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of miseducation. And so people have to be willing to re-educate themselves, because we have assumed that racism is a person who has prejudice in their heart and they act on that prejudice. That is a racist person. But racism is about prejudice plus power, and people who have the power to do something against a group of people with their prejudice. That's why a lot of times when we're talking about racism, which is very difficult for people to understand, it's extremely difficult for Blacks to be guilty of racism, because we don't have the power as a group to exercise power over another group, because the systems and structures that have been created have been predominantly managed and led and run and developed by white males historically. And so one of the things that's critical in getting past the strain is the truth. You know, the Bible says you shall know the truth and the truth sets you free. And so I am in concert with Brian Stevenson, who's over the Equal Justice Initiative. Many people have seen his movie, Just Mercy. He founded the museum, the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration in Montgomery, Alabama, and also the Peace and Justice Memorial to Lynching Victims. And so he's been talking about these truth commissions. We know that they have one in South Africa, Truth and Justice Commission, because you cannot get past this point that we're in unless we deal with some of these truths. And we're not going to do it being comfortable. It's going to be uneasy. I mean, when you have cancer, when you are going in for any kind of surgery or procedure, it's uncomfortable. But the difference is, when somebody's wielding a knife, for instance, a surgeon goes in to heal. Somebody who has in their hand with bad intentions is trying to kill. And so this is a process of healing, and we have to go in and do the difficult and the tedious and the precise and the uncomfortable work of healing our nation, not just from a racial past, but from a racist and racial current situation, because we have systems and structures that have racism that are throughout them because of the policies and practices that end up creating racial outcomes that cause racial disparities. And so truth commissions is one of the things that I just want to put out there. This work we're doing with the Carter Center, along with EJI, soon, that people will hear about, because we want to push more and more communities to engage in those truth commissions. The other thing is proximity, getting close to each other. It wasn't until the man who was on the Jericho Road, we call him the Good Samaritan, got up close and personal to the man on the side of the road, that he had a different perspective than the priest and the Levite who passed by, because they were on the other side of the road. When you get proximate to something, it gives you a different perspective. The closer you get greater clarity. And so courageous conversations have to take place. And true commission is one thing, but a courageous conversations in groups. I know we at the King Center have been doing beloved community talks in concert with civic dinners where people can have their own courageous conversation in groups. We can't do them at home now, but people can do them through Zoom, and really have these difficult conversations. And you have to have, ground rules. We're not trying to insult people. That's why these principles are important, because there's a way to speak truth in a language that people can hear. It may be uncomfortable, but they can hear it better. It'll be kind of like, what's that stuff we used to take that's real nasty, but we took it anyway because we knew it was good for us?
Good for us.
Castor oil. It'd be like taking castor oil. Yeah. And then finally, and I do recommend when people can to go visit the museum in Montgomery, as well as the lynching memorial. Cultural exchanges. It's hard to do that now because of the pandemic, but it's not enough. Diversity is not enough. I mean, you can bring people to a table, but the reality is, until we get to a place where we're all setting the table together jointly, right, we're not going to have true equity in this society, and we're going to have continual, tension in our world. And so we have to create environments where people feel like they're at the beginning of a decision. That's the true inclusion, not just inviting you in after the fact or in the middle of the fact, but inviting at the beginning and not having a table, just saying we're going to create and establish a table together. So I think those are three things that could be very helpful with your community.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I'd say on many occasions, realizing that what's going on here in Harrison, Arkansas, it can be pushed through education. We can change the channel. And some of the citizens of Harrison, it's no secret, they have the proclivity of displaying acts of racism. And there are some who do not, and like any other town throughout America. But the lamentable characteristics and issues of this city here in Harrison that make it an outcast are the very ones that, through education and needs of improvement, can change the city's image. So in other words, they have that same type of power to reverse what has been done as of recent. Ms. Ragsdale, the Harrison Task Force on Race Relations has partnered with the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission on several projects and endeavors. What is the purpose of the mission of the Harrison Task Force on Race Relations?
When we were first put together in 2003 by a previous mayor, our hope was that we could impact the negative image of our community as a racist community. But we did that by promoting and fostering the image and the reality of our community as warm and welcoming to all people, regardless of race. That has been our guiding principle. One of the things that we learned when we were able to go to the King Center and participate in the training, we really took to heart the principle number 2, which is the nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. That has always been one of our guidelines that we've used, and we've lived that out through 2 ways. One of those ways has been to exhibit respect to everyone. That has been our mantra through this whole time frame that we've been together. The other thing that we've really focused on is doing nothing that would prevent an adversary from becoming our strong advocate. And we keep those in mind. It's that principle of seeking friendship and understanding, because we want to be able to move forward into a beloved community setting with this. And we know in a small town, we're going to know those people. Those are our people, and we need to be able to move forward with that. So the task force has had those foundational guidelines, and that has helped us make decisions through thick and thin as we have gone through this time of working on this issue throughout our community.
Many of the citizens in Harrison are really wanting to make change, and I can see that happening. Mayor Jackson, why do you feel that Harrison is a continuous source of controversy regarding racism, and how do you feel that this can be rectified and eradicated?
Well, we have a Unfortunately, we have a family that lives outside of Harrison that claim the Klan as being here. And the KKK is a symbol, a very hateful symbol, but it is not Harrison, Arkansas. We must work harder, and we will, work smarter, and we will, to overcome this. And we've been working for 40 years, and we're going to continue to work hard. And there will come a time when Harrison is known for what it is, and that is a peaceful and loving community.
Very good, very good. So to clarify, 12 miles outside of Harrison is where the gentleman who is the president of the Knights, the KKK, that he just kind of uses a P.O. box in order to push mail or hate mail out. And for that reason, people throughout the United States feel as though it's Harrison, Arkansas, that is hated for all of these extreme measures. Would that be correct?
That is correct. When they moved here in the early 80s, they live in an unincorporated part of the county. The nearest big city, Harrison, has 13,000 people, so big city approximately. They took a post office box here, and they started to attempt to spread the image that they were influential in our community and that their headquarters are here. The truth is, they are an affiliate of the Klan. They actually are called the Knights Party, and they claim to be the headquarters of the KKK, and they do run a website under that name. But that is their self-proclamation for that. And they have attempted to make themselves appear bigger by using the reputation and using the name of our town in that. So that's what we fight against in that. About 6 years ago, they put up a billboard, and they had great success in that because media ran to Harrison, and they took pictures of the billboard, and it put it up. And we have been working through a series of billboards, getting those billboards down over time. They're First Amendment issues. They have a right to put them up, and we have no right to tell them that they have to take it down. But we continue to work through any leverage we can find to try and get that billboard, the last remaining billboard, down.
Well, Mayor Jackson, considering the recent events in conjunction with the Spirit of Progress, how do you propose that Harrison, Arkansas becomes a more accountable, more equitable, and a more just city for all citizens?
2 months ago, when I knew we were going to do this, I started studying up on Dr. Martin Luther King. We all knew about him. I knew about him, but I really didn't know about him. And the more I learned, when I ran across the beloved community, I said, that has got to be the goal of Harrison, Arkansas, where we embrace everyone and discriminate against no one. And we must and we will identify opportunities that appeal to all.
And the education that we have gotten through working with the Martin Luther King Commission, and then we were able to attend at the King Center, has been an absolute treasure to us. We have focused on the idea of cultural competency, not attacking other people, not in any way trying to be insulting or degrading, but trying to up everyone's level of the education, of the history, of the things that we need to know so we can move forward together in this as a community. And one of the roles the task force has taken on is when there are issues within the community that people feel, this could be visitors or this could be people that live here, that they feel that there is a concern that is based in racial bias, they can come to the task force, and we have then worked with people throughout the community, whether that might be city officials or whether that's business owners or whatever the situation may be, to try and work through those issues with them. So as a community, we learn how to have those conversations, and we can sit down together and look for some type of response or resolution. It's been powerful.
Yes, yes. And just to talk a little bit more about the controversy, Mayor Jackson, with all due respect and at the risk of offending you, why was it of higher importance to you to remove the Black Lives Matter billboard rather than the white pride radio or anti-racist means anti-white billboard? If it isn't of higher importance for you, what implored you to recently speak out against the Black Lives Matter sign on the City of Harrison's Facebook page and not the other two signs?
Well, we have been fighting that billboard war for about 6 years, and we have made great progress. We have been able to remove 3 of the 4 hateful billboards. And like Layne mentioned earlier, they have the right to put it up there. Now, we are working on it and working hard. We put out a petition recently, and we have had over 250,000 people sign that petition to remove this billboard in a town of only 13,000. That's incredible. But onto the post. The post is something that I strongly regret. I've apologized for it. I can tell you about the 6 months prior to that post, where the frustration led up to that. But that would just be an excuse, and actually there is no excuse. On Sunday night, August 23rd at 9:30, I failed, and I regret that, and I apologize to anyone that I offended with that post.
And I'd like to say about Mayor Jackson, when he first got involved with the task force and we worked to get the first racist sign down, he was not mayor. He used the leverage that he had through his business connections and through the business that he owns to help get that down. And the concerns and the issues that have come up through the post and the other issues that have happened this summer here in Harrison have been so disheartening, because it took away from a lot of the good that we were in the process of doing, including the change.org petition that we have with so many signatures. But we're not giving up on that. While the ball may have, our eyes took off that ball for just a little bit, we're still using all the leverage we can to try to continue to remove those offensive billboard in our city, to where when people come, they do see us as warm and welcoming, and that isn't the first thing they see trying to come into our city.
Mayor Jackson, do Black Lives Matter? And what does that mean when you hear that stated?
Yes, Black Lives Matter. And it means simply that, Black Lives Matter. That's it.
You know, I hear the cries of Harrison, the community, wanting to come together. We're bringing in Dr. Bernice King, where you've solicited help from the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. I want to take the time real quick to ask Dr. Bernice King. Dr. King, what did your father envision when he spoke of a beloved community?
Wow, it's a lot to consume, but to try to simplify it, it's first of all, he believed it was a realistic and achievable vision of a society that is inclusive, infused with agape love, where nonviolence is embraced by a critical mass of people who are committed to eradicating those things that threaten that society that he called the triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism, and creating a pathway where all can share in the wealth and resources of the earth. Conflict would be a part of that beloved community, but everyone is committed to utilizing that philosophy and methodology of nonviolence to resolve those conflicts peacefully. And again, respecting that the end goal is redemption and reconciliation for everyone. We spend and exercise our energies collectively to work against those systems and structures and practices and policies that would seek to overcome and undermine our humanity and how we value people, how we respect people, and how we treat people with dignity. And so the hard work is how do we really get rid of these systems? As I've been listening to our discussion, I think some of the work that you all have been doing is great, but I just want to push you a little bit, because after you get rid of signs, even if you were able to remove all the hate groups, the issue still remains that we have very racial structures and systems. And that's been the entire cry of Black Lives Matter. I don't think they were just saying it to say nobody else matters. They're saying, hey, y'all, we are here too. And for years, starting with slavery, we have been the consistent group of people who have been oppressed, who have been lynched, who have been marginalized, who have been demeaned, who have been discriminated against, who have had essentially the knee on our neck to keep us from being able to live out our true purpose for being here on earth. And so Black Lives Matter is that cry to remind this nation that we cannot continue to move forward and not address the fact that if you look at all of the data and all of the statistics in every arena of American life, from education to healthcare to criminal justice to wealth creation to real estate, the list, the entire list, that Blacks are still at the bottom and last. And it's not because something is wrong with us. It's because there have been systems and structures and practices and policies in place that have continued to perpetuate these racial outcomes. And so we all have to commit in a beloved community to ridding ourselves of those systems and structures. And that's why you hear language about deconstruct and reconstruct, because we have been founded, unfortunately, on a faulty foundation. When we founded this nation, Blacks were property. And so we got to contend with that. You can't start on a faulty foundation and expect to get to a stable and sustainable structure. And so these are all difficult, again, conversations. But if the beloved community is going to be built, it's not something where we can just kind of all get along and ignore these real serious issues and disparities that continue to persist today for the Black community. And so that's why Black lives have to matter. That's why Black lives must matter. And that's why this country, if we don't, my father said, if we don't pursue justice, and his definition for justice, he said, true peace is, for peace. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. So you can quiet things down, but you still don't have true peace. That's a negative peace. Right. The only way that you can have true peace is to have the presence of justice. And what people are hearing over and over again is a cry from people in the Black community in particular, and there are other communities that have issues that are marginalized as well, is that we are crying out for justice and equity because we don't have it. And Daddy said in 1967, in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos of Community, that if we as a nation don't make it a priority to pursue justice, that social tension will grow and turbulence in the streets will persist. And here we are 50-some years, two years late after his assassination, and 53 years after those words were written in his Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos community. And that's exactly what we're experiencing. So my cry, my encouragement is that we prioritize making justice essential in this nation and in our communities across this world. Because if not, this tension will grow. Yes. And it will outgrow us, and it will be unmanageable. And then we end up not with the beloved community, but we unfortunately end up with people responding in ways that I don't agree with, but it is a cry out of their heart. and they don't see any other way, because if you don't provide people with a pathway to justice, that's when violence does begin to happen.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, yes, and it certainly can fester out of control. And
yes,
you've seen that happen post George Floyd after the killing, and it sparked throughout the nation that there was racial tension. So we've seen that happen. Mayor Jackson, where do you see Harrison, the image of Harrison, in the next 5 years? And do the city's long-range goals include input from minority citizens and stakeholders?
I see Harrison as hopefully the small town that didn't quit. You know, after that video came out, I can tell you I was ready to quit and give up on 40 years of hard work. And I'll bet Layne felt the same way. But we can't quit. And we will continue, and we will work harder and smarter and try to figure out a way to lick this thing in Harrison, Arkansas. I think on the second part of your question, we have already been having discussions about putting minorities together in positions of leadership throughout the town. So as bad as the video was, it has got our attention about several things, and we hope to move forward in a very positive way.
Well, you know, I've stated on several occasions, I feel, you know, that racism is a learned behavior. If we ask students at local high school the same question right here in Harrison, what will the city look like in 5 years from now? What do you think their answers would be, Mayor?
Well, you know, we recently did, Layne will speak on this, with the high school. We asked the principal to give us a few kids that we could talk to and address this question. He said, I'll give you 150 and put them in the Performing Arts Center, and you can come and ask them whatever you want. Well, that was a pretty big challenge, but we took on that challenge. And I think one person, and he said it so well, he answered that question for us, and he said this. He said, I see Harrison's image changing drastically because our generation is not racist, and we will teach our children not to be. Layne?
We had the spectrum of answers from the students. Some, because of our reputation, thought they don't see that changing. Others thought that, yes, we can change that because our generation is better. And that was the thread that ran through all of it. It was that the young people looked and thought they were doing a better job than the adults that they see, including us, were. And that gave me great hope. Dr. King, I follow your Facebook page, and you had posted recently asking what was one thing that people could do to impact humanity. The first thing that popped up, the first answer that popped up on my feed was a lady that said that she hoped that she could stop the ancestral racism that she had inherited in her family. And that really spoke to me, because I thought that's our prayer for all of the students in our area, all of the youth in this area that may be affected by this racism, that they can be put to a stop here. And our young people in our community think they can do that.
Well, certainly understand that. And Dr. King is celebrated now for his work in nonviolence, peaceful demonstration embracing love and forgiveness in the face of imminent danger. During the civil rights movement, his work wasn't popular because of opposition, whether it was peaceful or not uncomfortable. But based on the 6 principles, Dr. King, what advice would you give to the Black Lives Matter participants and peaceful protest groups to help others understand the message behind their movement?
Well, I think the most important thing that can occur with Black Lives Matter is to really study and learn and maybe even come through our education and training about the philosophy and methodology and the strategies that my father used to bring about social change. It's probably it is one of the most effective ways to bring about social change in terms of Dr. King. There's studies that have proven that nonviolence is the best way to bring social change. So the reason I said that is because one of the things we hear over and over again out of that group is about leadership, and that they prefer decentralized leadership. They're full of leaders, but they prefer decentralized leadership. And while I can respect that, I think it's important that they understand the value of my father was that he was a spokesperson for the movement. He was able to articulate the movement. He was able to articulate the issues on all sides. And so messaging is very important, but not just the message. The language around the message is just as important. Daddy used to say to Stokely Carmichael when he said Black Power, he said, leaders have to be concerned about semantics. And so semantics means that there's a denotative meaning, the definition of the word, but then there's the connotative, the suggestive, words that have been associated and affiliated with those words that not always positive. And so you have to be very choicey in how you express that message. And so finding and cultivating those among the leaderful Black Lives Matter who can be those spokespersons to clarify their messaging, I think is very critical at this time.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Ms. Ragsdale, according to the World Bank, which is a database of statistics and information compiled from around the world, social inclusion is the process of improving the terms on which individuals and groups take part in society, improving the ability and opportunity and dignity of those at disadvantage based on their identity. Now, with that said, how socially inclusive is Harrison, Arkansas, from the perspective of its citizens compared to the perspective of outsiders?
I think outsiders see us from our reputation and think we're not socially inclusion at all. We don't see ourselves that way. We see the fact that as people move into our community, we try to incorporate that and we try to include them in the various aspects. And that's what we're wanting. We're wanting to portray that inclusion, and we want the world to see that as well. And Jerry might have more to add on that as well.
Yeah, I agree with her completely. I think the citizens would disagree with that, whereas outsiders probably believe we are. A local Black man recently told me, and I'm going to quote him because this was really good. He said, without a doubt, Harrison is far more welcoming than racist. So coming out of his mouth meant a lot. And that's the exact same words that come out of all minorities that I've talked to, and I seem to talk to a lot. So it's just amazing. Everybody comes to Harrison and they'll throw up their arms and say, wow, what a wonderful place. What people are saying is just not true.
Mayor, a video was recently released on social media that went viral showing a young man, a Caucasian man, receiving threats for holding a Black Lives Matter sign in Harrison, Arkansas. While we realize that the views of these individuals were hostile in the video and they don't reflect the entire community, why do you feel that this sign is so offensive when the theory it is free speech and to some merely a matter of opinion?
Yeah, and it absolutely was not the sign that was offensive. It was what the people said that drove by. And even today, I had a young man tell me that the minute that video came out, his phone blew up with people telling him, get out of Harrison. It's not safe there. Well, fortunately, he knew better. He knew it was. But the one thing I want to point out about that video, there were 24 people that responded and said horrible things, horrible things. But what we did the very next day is I wanted to talk to those people. So I reached out to 20 people that I knew that knew a lot of people. I said, let's find out who those people are. We were only able to identify 3 of those. We were just shocked. We could only identify 3. What that told us is a lot of those people came from elsewhere. They might have been from outside of Harrison. They might have been from outside of Arkansas. We have a very busy highway that comes right through town. And if you're anywhere in the South and you're going to our popular destination of Branson, you drive right up that highway. And we have 80,000 people in that 3-day period that drove up there. So more than likely, now that doesn't excuse the 3 that were here, and I'm sure there were more. But most of those people were probably from elsewhere.
And I also think, to the point that Dr. King made about messaging, some of those people showed overt racism, and there is no question about it. But some of those people were pushing back toward the Black Lives Matter message. And when you listen to their questions, it was because they don't understand what that message was. And I think that's a part of the education process also.
Well, you know, the King philosophy states one expression of agape love in Dr. King's beloved community is justice, not for any one oppressed group, but for all people. As Dr. King often said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He felt that justice could not be parceled out to individuals or groups, but it was a birthright of every human being in the beloved community. I was taught by my mentor, Dr. Bernice A. King, that beloved community is defined as saying a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings, a society in which all are embraced and non-discriminated against. So my question is you, Dr. King, do you believe that this generation that will finally see the change that your father dreamed of?
I think I'm very optimistically hopeful. Let me say that, or should I say, I'm hopeful with a bit of a reservation. Let me say it that way, and I'm hopeful because there are a lot of people leaning in now, generationally. There are people, in particular in the white community, that are really looking at ways to participate in creating a beloved community that is based off of a new society that really looks at the foundation from which we built this country. There are people across different professions and different arenas that are part of this. And so I'm cautiously optimistic because I know we've been here before, but this time I've seen the collision of those young people crying out about Black lives and the white community really leaning in a way that they've never leaned in, and more even being in the streets. There are a lot of whites and other communities that are part of these protests today. And so, yes, I think we might see it.
Wow. Very well spoken. And, you know, I'd like to take this opportunity right now to thank all of our special guests. Layne Ragsdale with the Harrison Task Force on Race Relations, Mayor Jerry Jackson, and you, Dr. Bernice A. King, the youngest daughter of the late civil rights icon, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you all so much for participating and being part of this, Layne. I thank you so much for being part of this and helping bring in the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission to help bring race relations together.
Well, we thank you for including us in this and doing the hard work to put this together. And I just want to say to Dr. King, thank you for taking the time today. You do hard work. And from our side, you are encouragement and a touchstone to us. And we're so appreciative of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, Dr. King, I'd also like to thank you. I really got to know your father much better in this last couple of months. And, you know, I saw the videos where he was marching to the ballot boxes and things of that nature that just really, really affected me in a great way. And I love everything he stood for. Everything you guys are doing are fabulous. So thank you so much. Thanks for DuShun. Hey.
Yeah, and thank you all for the work that you are doing in Harrison to build towards the beloved community. And I know it's not easy. But if we commit ourselves and continue to do the hard work, we will get there. And so thank you all so much for what you're doing. And thank you, DuShun, for bringing us together for this conversation that was much needed.
Absolutely. You know, the work will continue. Dr. King's dream will continue. And it's truly been an honor to have you join us in this virtual conversation. I'm sure all of America will get an opportunity to see this, and we thank everyone for tuning in. I'm DuShun Scarbrough, Executive Director of the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, and we're a division of the Arkansas Department of Education. We leave you with this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your evening.
My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious races, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.